Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Juggling Balls podcast. I'm your host, Stu. Today, we're going to be looking at the situation at Manchester United and why has it gone so wrong for them, and can it get better? We're also going to take a look at Liverpool, obviously with the big clash between United and Liverpool this weekend. We're going to take a look at them and whether or not they're going to be coasting to the title. We're also going to take a look at the situation at Newcastle at the moment after their victory over United and with having the international break to recover a little bit. Can they continue on their good form? And we're also going to have a quick look at the whole hashtag Pep Out Brigade and how ridiculous that really is. So let's get started. So, when we last spoke, we were predicting the fixtures for the latest at the time Premier League fixtures, and Man United were away to Newcastle, and what I thought was going to be a pretty poor game in the first place, I kind of hopefully put down as a 2-1. Obviously, was not how it turned out at all. It turned out to be a 1-0 to Newcastle and a well-earned 1-0 for Newcastle at that. So, after that result, it's left United in somewhat of a precarious position. They're currently 12th with 8 games played, having earned 9 points. They've won 2, drawn 3, lost 3. They've scored 9 goals and conceded 8. So that statistic on its own shows you how the areas that they're struggling in is getting goals and being able to keep a lead, really. With 1 goal difference after 8 games, that's not really something you would expect from a United team. Even in the past few years, never mind the Fergie years where everything was sunshine and roses. So what we're going to do is going to have a little bit of a look back over the past years since Ferguson's left, and I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive into where I personally think it's gone wrong and where the blame is. So we'll start off with the transfers. The transfers since Ferguson left have been nothing short of a disaster, with 1 or 2 shining lights in the middle of them, who have actually came up trumps and performed well. And I'm not talking about just transfers coming in, I'm talking about transfers going out. So we'll start at the first full season of Ferguson's departure, so that was 13 to 14 when David Moyes was at the helm. So if you didn't know how bad the transfer window was, or you'd forgotten how bad the transfer was, in the 2 transfer windows during that season, we signed 2 players. In the September transfer window, on the last day of transfer deadline day, we signed Marouane Fellaini from Everton for £29 million. When we basically had an aging team, sure, we still had Van Persie and people like that, and Rooney still playing for us, but we had an aging defence, we had short numbers in midfield, and we bought Marouane Fellaini, and there was no one else. Throughout that summer, we were rumoured to be linked with Bale. Obviously, he went to Madrid in that summer. People like Toni Kroos, Luka Modric, all guys who were in and around Madrid. I believe this was the summer, or was close to the summer, of when Ramos was kicking off at Real Madrid as well, saying that he wanted to leave because his contract was nowhere near what he wanted, because he was a first-team player, captain of the club. Like, he was expecting better terms. Basically using the fact that we were interested in Ramos to get himself a better contract, which football players are bound to do nowadays. And it was no different back then. So yeah, that was our September transfer window in 2013, which spelled the disaster of that season was going to be under Moyes, probably, to most fans. But then in January, we probably had one of the best transfers we've had since Ferguson left, and we bought Juan Mata for £40 million from Chelsea. Again, Matt has been a great servant for the club for 6 years. Can't really fault what he's done. But again, it was just the one transfer when clearly at that point we needed a few more fresh faces in just to get the team going again. Obviously mix that in with the fact that Moyes was just clueless as to the level that he needed to manage at and the players he was managing. I mean, giving David Moyes that 7-year contract, I think it was, and telling him, you've got this job, and then letting him tell Nemanja Vidic and Rio Ferdinand, 2 of the greatest ever Premier League defenders that's ever played in the league, or ever played football, or English football I should say, how to defend like Sylvain Distin and Phil Jagielka really does take the mick, basically. So really that Moyes season was just a bad start. So the transfer policy was just all wrong there. If we go to the next season, this is when Louis van Gaal came in, and this was the start of... Well, this was really the start of us trying to lay down a mark in the transfer window and bring players in who are going to be of a certain calibre. We also let a few players go, which didn't really make sense to me personally, but again, it was Van Gaal's transfer policy, and he obviously wanted to play a specific way, and I couldn't really argue with some of the transfers, but some of those I was scratching my head a little bit at them. So in terms of transfers for the 14-15 season, we spent £67 million on Angel Di Maria, who was a one-season arrival. He wasn't a wonder. He played good for a few games, got a few good assists, but really didn't turn up to the races. And then I think we sold him for like £10 million less the next season to PSG, which I'll be able to check for you in a moment. We bought Luke Shaw. Again, he's been another one that's been a hit and miss. He's had good runs in the team, but injuries keep following him. And Herrera, probably one of the better... again, like Mata, was one of the better transfers that we've had. Bought him for 30 million from Athletic Bilbao. Unfortunately, he's recently left, but I think that this season has shown that we really could have done with him in field, as good a player as he is. He's not outstanding, but he'll give you a solid 7 or 8 out of 10 every week, and that's something United desperately need at the minute. We've also bought Marcos Rojo, who still is somehow at United, even though the past 2 seasons he's been rumoured to leave. He's still there. Daley Blind, who I never really felt got a good, fair enough shout at United. We bought him for 15 million for Ajax, and he's now back there since that transfer. And we signed Falcao on loan when he was rushing himself back from a ligament injury to play for Colombia in the World Cup. And in pre-season looked pretty awful and was returned to fitness, which you're not going to be at 100% once you return from a ligament injury, which I think is why we took the loan rather than buying him. And then in the departures, we had Danny Welbeck leave for £18 million to go to Arsenal. Welbeck, in my opinion, hadn't really done a lot wrong up until this point. He'd had his best run in the team in the David Moyes season, which I know isn't saying a lot, but he was scoring goals that campaign. We sold Shinji Kagawa for £7 million to Dortmund. Again, he was another player I felt really didn't live up to his potential, but I don't think he got a fair crack of the whip from Van Gaal. Alexander Butner, there's his name. We sold him to Dinamo Moscow, and the last transfer of Ferguson's era was Wilfried Zaha. We sold him for £3 million back to Crystal Palace. Like, just absolutely bizarre why with this transfer policy that we had was trying to bring in big names like Di Maria, who clearly didn't live up to the bill. And this is just the first 2 seasons. We haven't even got onto some of the bigger catastrophes of the transfer market that we had. So yeah, 14-15 wasn't great. I mean, we did finish top 4 that season, so to a certain extent, it did work. And then the next season, we bought Anthony Martial for 54 million. We brought in Morgan Schneiderlin, remember him, for 30 million from Southampton. Memphis Depay, another one to try and remember, for 30 million. Matteo Darmian for 16 million, who's only just left this summer. We bought Schweinsteiger for 8 million and Sergio Romero on a free transfer. Now, for me, personally, that if you look at the list of the transfer windows, that's probably one of the better ones that we've had in terms of what we needed to buy and the quality of player that we were buying. There was generally, you had a couple of young up-and-comers in Depay and Martial. You had Schneiderlin, who was a solid Premier League midfielder. You had Bastian Schweinsteiger, who was probably coming towards the end of his peak, but could still probably do a good enough job. And you had an Italian international, Darmian. But for one reason or another, that 15-16 season just fell to bits with Van Gaal. That season, we sold the likes of Di Maria, Chicharito. Chicharito was one I just put my head in my hands and did not understand why we sold him. Natural goal scorer. He's an absolute cracker of a poacher. And to get rid of him the way we did, I just did not understand. Johnny Evans left, Robin Van Persie left, Nani, Raphael. All these names that were mainstays and probably weren't playing well enough to warrant staying in the team left. Apart from Chicharito really was the one there that didn't really sit well with me leaving. And then we have the first season of Mourinho, where we bought Pogba for 90 million, Mkhitaryan for almost close to 40 million, Eric Bailly for over 30, and we got Zlatan on a free. Again, not a bad transfer window in terms of quality of players, but Zlatan's left. Eric Bailly keeps getting injured. Mkhitaryan's now at Arsenal and looking like, well, he's not at Arsenal anymore. He was sold to Arsenal, but he's now at Roma on loan. So, and we sold Morgan Schneiderlin and Memphis Depay in the space of a season. For half, we sold Depay for half of what we bought him for, and Schneiderlin for 10 million less than what we bought him for. So again, absolutely mind-boggling transfer policy in terms of what we were bringing in and what we needed. I mean, Pogba was definitely the type of midfielder that we needed. We need someone who can carry the ball forward, get goals and get assists. But again, can you really say he's lived up to the price tag of 90 million? Absolutely not. And then we have the second season of Mourinho. So this is the season when we finished second to City. We bought Lukaku for 75 million, Matic for 40, and Lindelof for 30 million. In January, we bought Sanchez for 30 million, with Mkhitaryan going the other way. Didn't lose too many players in this window. I mean, Zlatan went in the middle of the season on a free to LA Galaxy, and Rooney went to Everton on a free transfer. Mkhitaryan obviously left as part of the Sanchez deal. But this is really one of those ones where I'm scratching my head in terms of the amount of money we paid for these players and how much we've got back. We've pretty much got our money back for Lukaku. Sanchez is currently out there on loan and he's got an injury to his ankle. I think he dislocated his ankle or something like that. Matic is now well past his peak and we spent 40 million on him. Lindelof is probably the one mainstay out of those four that you're probably looking at is going to be there for the long term. And has looked, since that Juventus game last season, has looked pretty good. You've then got last season's rivals of Fred, Dalot and Lee Grant. And obviously during that summer, that was the infamous press conferences of Mourinho saying he needed another defender because we weren't playing well enough. We also saw Blint in that transfer window. And then you come to this year when we bought Harry Maguire, Wan-Bissaka and Daniel James. And that was for a total of 140 odd million. And then we sold Lukaku, sent out Chris Smalling, Darmian and Sanchez on loan. Likes of Valencia, James Wilson and Herrera went on free transfers. Valencia and Wilson were coming to the end of the time, so it was no great surprise that they left. But Herrera, again, another sign to the club that we all wanted to stay, but clearly there was a disagreement between him and the management and didn't want to stay. So as I'm looking at this list of transfers, I'm currently just quickly having a quick scroll through them just to see how many are success or have been good transfers. I'm getting to the 15-16 season. I'm not seeing any being a overall massive success. No, 14-15. So it's got me to 14-15, and that's the first player I'm looking at that has been a success, and that was Herrera. And you've then got Juan Mata. So the two players I think who have been a massive overall success, who have played well consistently for us, have been Herrera and Mata. If you're looking at people that are probably going to come out good, you're probably looking at Lindelof. I can't put Luke Shaw in that category because he's getting injured far too often and doesn't have a good run enough. Martial would be in that category for me because I still think he's going to come good at some point. He's just getting his fitness back for the season and I think he'll start to score goals for us again. But yeah, when you're looking at the amounts of money we've spent in the past 6 years, and we've got 2 good transfers out of it and 2 possible future good transfers out of it, and the rotation of players that we've had, it's simply not good enough. I don't know who makes the transfer decisions. It's been strongly hinted that it's Woodward that makes the decisions, but as to whether that's true or not, I don't know. He's come out recently and said that, basically hitting back at the critics, saying that football people not making the decisions, saying that they're not making decisions, being left to not footballing people is a myth and an insult. Well, I'm sorry, mate, but if you look at the transfer windows, it's not suggesting that someone who knows the football is making great decisions on their behalf. This first summer of where we're supposed to be changing the culture and changing the transfer policy and how we're going to go about business, you can see the signs of what they're looking to do. It's just that there's some questioning over whether or not the decisions have been the correct ones. I mean, spending 85 million, or it's saying here on this website that I'm looking at 78 million, but I think it was closer to 85 on Harry Maguire, or it could rise to 85 for Harry Maguire, is a bizarre one, because as good as a centre back he is, he's not Virgil van Dijk level, and I would have struggled to pay 70 million for Virgil van Dijk. I wouldn't be looking to pay more than 60-50 million for him. But again, that's the transfer window we're in. You're a centre back in the Premier League of a decent standard, or a very good standard in the eyes of Van Dijk, you're going to be paying those prices. But Harry Maguire will be a good signing for us. I think he's our long-term centre back, and probably potentially a future captain of the club as well. Wan-Bissaka is another one who I think will come good, as well as is Daniel James. But in terms of them coming good straight away and getting us into top 4 this season, I don't think that's going to happen without reinforcements in January. And the language coming out of press conferences from Solskjaer is, unless the right people are there and it's the right price, we're not going to be paying for them. Unfortunately, United have got themselves into such a position now that we're going to have to continue to pay over the odds of players that we want. We're not going to be able to get the bargain deals and the cheaper prices that we used to get in yesteryear when it was David Gill and Ferguson running the show. Solskjaer probably has the strength to say yes or no to certain players, and that's fair enough, but when you've got someone like Woodward who doesn't seem to really get the concept of trying to pay a small amount as possible, run the show, if a team quotes 100 million for a top player, we're going to have to pay that. We can't dilly and dally with it, because we're so far behind the top teams now. We're not gonna do it with just buying young British players. We're gonna have to buy some top players now. We're gonna have to go on the likes of players and pay contracts that we probably aren't feeling comfortable paying. And we paid 400 grand to Alexis Sanchez a week, for Christ's sake. Like, are we really saying that we should be paying 400 grand a week for Alexis Sanchez, who was already on a dip in that first half of the season we bought him with Arsenal? I just, the transfer policy on its own is reason enough to show why it's gone wrong at United. Other things that have gone wrong as being the policy in terms of the managers. David Moyes, giving him such a lengthy contract, was that really the wisest decision? No. I think that you could see how it was going after the first half of the season with Moyes, that it wasn't going to get any better with him. People were saying we should have given him a second summer. If we'd given him a second summer, are we really going to say we're going to come out with much more than what we got in the first 2 transfer windows? I don't think, if with David Moyes, I don't think we're going to be attracting the likes of the player that we were linked with, like Bale, Kroos, Modric, Muller, people like that. Players that probably realistically we wouldn't have got in normal circumstances. But if we had a top manager in like a Mourinho at that point, you could have made an argument that maybe we would have. But with Moyes, it certainly wasn't going to continue. Giving him such a huge contract was just made no sense. You then go into the Van Gaal era, and I think there was nothing wrong with the Van Gaal era in terms of the transfer policy. Like, we brought in younger players, we brought in players that should play well because they were still in the peak of their careers. I mean, Di Maria and Falcao, I thought Di Maria we were on to an absolute winner with, because he was a cracking player at Madrid and was really undervalued by them by the time he left. Falcao, I wasn't too sure about the time, again, because of the ligament injury. You never know how a player's going to bounce back. And with the fact that he was trying to rush back for a World Cup, he's probably done it, and then that was it. But I mean, it's just, the transfer policy has been such that basically you've had a mixture of players come in, and then another manager's come in, and then another mixture of players come in, and you've got probably 3 or 4 ways of different managers' philosophies into the team, and there isn't one surefire set way that the players are going to understand each other. And I think that's what Solskjaer has tried to do this summer. If you look at the likes of the departures of Lukaku, Smalling, Darmian, Valencia, Herrera, Sanchez, you're looking at those players, and those all came from the Mourinho and Van Gaal eras, and well, except from Smalling, who came at the Ferguson time. And he's trying to get rid of the players who don't want to be there, which I think is where you probably point the finger at Lukaku and Sanchez, and bring players in who are going to be more enthusiastic about the club, who are going to be more emotionally attached to the club and play for the badge and have some real spirit about them. And I think that likes of Maguire and Bissaka and James, I'd say Bissaka before he got injured was probably one of the few bright lights of the season, and so was James. James has been playing well. he's a threat going forward. His pace is absolutely electric. Like, you could never dispute that he isn't exciting to watch. And I think at the minute, for United fans, including myself, he's one of the few bright sparks that we enjoy watching, because he does have a threat about him. So yeah, so in terms of the managers, I mean, Van Gaal had a totally different system to Moyes. It was total football, keep the ball. And then again, Mourinho comes in, it's a totally different style of play. And it's defensive, slightly more counter-attacking football, but not really taking the handbrake off. And then Mourinho's left, and now you have Solskjaer, who is trying to play the so-called United way. And he's really setting us up for the counter-attack. But when you get teams like Newcastle United playing against you, who aren't going to keep the ball, they're going to sit back, let you try and take it on, and then hit us on the counter themselves, which a lot of the Premier League teams are going to do, unless they like some Man City and Liverpool, who can just dominate the ball and beat you anyway. You're not gonna get much joy out of that, and we don't really have options at the moment in terms of how we can build up possession and take it forward and keep the ball on the edge of the box and build pressure. We don't have that ability. We've got young attacking players who've got pace and who work really well on the counter, which is exactly what happened at Chelsea, and should probably be the way forward for the rest of the season. But I think you leave yourself at risk of conceding too many goals, and our defence has been fairly sound. I don't have much to complain about the defence. The problem we have is scoring goals, and we need strikers, and we need more creativity in the midfield. And I think hopefully, if Pogba can get fit consistently and actually turns up, we can maybe get that from him, and he can maybe be the assister to hopefully getting some goals for Martial and Rashford, and see where we go from there. Because I don't see it coming from Lingard. I don't see it coming from Pereira. McTominay isn't that type of midfielder. He's a defensive, interceptive midfielder. Mata could probably do a job at the odd game, but he's more of a centre-attacking midfielder. So he's not really the type of ball-playing midfielder that Pogba is, sitting in the middle of midfield and distributing it. Not as the one sort of on the edge of the box, keeping things ticking over and setting up and setting people up and getting goals himself. So yeah, it's not a great situation at United at the moment. I think it all started from David Gill leaving and Woodward being put in charge. Like, you can't fault Woodward for his financial work, but you could fault him for the transfer policy, the way he's rotated the managers, how he's brought managers in and brought them out. And obviously with the rumours now starting to build up about Allegri coming in for Solskjaer, I mean, that might be put a little bit of dampener with Woodward. The story coming out today from Woodward saying that he's backing Solskjaer to the hilt, and basically this is a new policy we're going forward with, and that's been echoed in Solskjaer's conference this morning as of recording on the 18th of October. So yeah, it's hard to see how the upper management are improving things or how it's going to change. I think the only thing I can say is that Ollie obviously has an idea in his head of how he's going to go about doing it, and that's bringing in younger players who aren't necessarily at the peak but are close to it and can improve further, which is clearly what he's fought with Maguire. He's not at his peak at the moment, but he's probably just 1 or 2 levels below that. But once he hits the peak, we should be getting the best out of him. Wan-Bissaka is another cracking player who's playing well and has massive amounts of potential in that position at right back. Dan James is another one who's got loads of potential and is a threat already. He's scored a few goals for us already, and hopefully will continue to get better. But if Ollie's going to change this, he needs backing from the boardroom, and also he needs to start getting some confidence back into the players. And I think if the unlikely thing happens and we were to get a positive result against Liverpool on Sunday, that might be the start of it. Because if you take a look at the fixtures for United going forward, I mean, after the dreaded fixture with Liverpool on Sunday, they've got the Europa League fixture against Partizan Belgrade. They've then got Norwich away on the Sunday. You've got Chelsea away at the Cup the following Wednesday. And then for November, in the Premier League alone, you've got Bournemouth, Brighton, Sheffield United. Like, after the Liverpool game, if we can't get 3 wins out of those 4 games, we're really going to be staring down the barrel of a horrific season. We are only 3 points off now, but if we suffer with results between now and the end of November, we could really be looking at a gap opening up to about 10 points if we're not careful. And I think this is going to be... if we're going to kickstart the season, it's got to come now. Otherwise, it could be Solskjaer out, unfortunately, because I think there's going to be too much pressure from the Glazers coming down on Woodward to say we need to improve it now. And if Allegri's available, there might be too much pressure on him. But I can see a way out for Ollie in that if he picks up a few decent results and gets some momentum going, I don't think we can ever go on a run like we did last time when he first joined. But if we get 5 or 6 wins out of the next 8 or 9 games, we'll probably be in close to the top 4 position. And I think after the way we've started, I don't think you can ask a lot more than that. So yeah, I think there is. It's going to be very difficult because if players aren't fit and we lost the amount of players that we have and they stay out injured, I don't really see how it improves. But the fixtures that we've got coming up, there are definitely fixtures we can get results out of and start to turn the season around. It's not all doom and gloom, as much as people at work would want me to believe. But anyway, moving on from Man United and moving on to Liverpool. So yeah, let's just say it's been a pretty comfortable start for Liverpool. 8 wins out of 8. 20 goals scored in 8 games, not bad. 6 goals conceded. Could have done better. I'm only joking. 14 goals difference already. 24 points maximum that you can get. It's going to be interesting to see for the rest of the season what happens with Liverpool, because I think if you looking at their fixtures going forward, you've got in October, you've got obviously Man United next on Sunday. You've then got Spurs next weekend. If they come out with 6 points out of those 2 fixtures, which is easily, I think, for the Liverpool team that they've got, I think is easily doable, because Liverpool, even though they're away at Old Trafford, are playing a United team who are in a very precarious position at the moment, and then you've got Tottenham who aren't necessarily in the greatest form themselves, and they're playing at Anfield in that Tottenham game. You've then got the likes of, in November, you've got Villa, City, you're playing City at Anfield, and then you've got Crystal Palace away, and then Brighton at home. I'm only really seeing 2 fixtures out of the next 6 for Liverpool potentially dropping all 3 points. So if you look at 14 games, you've won 12 of them. I don't really see City closing that gap tremendously between now and then. I think the danger period for Liverpool in terms of the shall we say, in terms of their title challenge, is really over the end of December and through January, because that's where they faltered last season when they were 10 points ahead. I mean, if you look at December, they've got the likes of Everton at early December. That's always a tricky game. You've got then fast forward to the end of December, you've got Leicester away, Wolves at home, and then going into the new year, you've got Spurs in the middle of January, you've got Man United in the middle of January, and then you've got Wolves towards the end of January in the Premier League. So those aren't easy. That's not a particularly nice run of fixtures you've got, because Wolves, I think by then will be back up and running, because they're slowly starting to build momentum with a couple of wins before the international break. You'd think Spurs have probably sorted themselves out by the beginning of January. Who knows where Man United will be by the 19th of January 2020, but hopefully they'll be in a better position. Well, hopefully for me anyway. I'm sure there's plenty of fans out there who don't want them to improve. But yeah, I think if they can keep the majority of the team injury free, if they can keep the main players injury free, like the likes of Salah and Mane, there's no reason why Liverpool can't really go the distance and win the title this year. I think if you look at City's defence, the fact that they lost Laporte, they don't have a high quality central defensive leader at the moment. They've got the likes of Otamendi, they've got Fernandinho playing in central defence for them, which will work against the lower sides of the Premier League. But when you've got the likes of Harry Kane and like Salah and Mane and Firmino and then you've got like some teams like Jamie Vardy, like who's got great pace, and you've like Leicester, they've got a great attacking unit at the moment. If you look at those top 5 teams, they've got threats that can really dent City's defensive unit. But I think there is a way for them to really coast away to the title this year. So moving on to the next one. So we're going to take a quick look at Newcastle. Obviously, they've had a great result winning at home to Man United, getting the first home win of the season. First win for Steve Bruce, I think, in like 20 years or something against United of management. So obviously a great result for them. And obviously the high praise that was coming during that game was for Matty Longstaff, because he did have a tremendous performance. So that's the two Longstaff brothers that played in midfield, Matty and Sean, who have now been coined as M&S, which I think is just tremendous. But yeah, I mean, if you look at Newcastle, they have the basis of a team that really is probably going to be in and around the bottom half of the table, but they have players like Maximilian and Joel Linton and Almiron, and they've got players with a bit of flair and who have the ability to create something out of nothing. And I think if you've got players like that in your team, you always have a chance of picking up points. And I'm not saying that Newcastle are out of the woods yet, because they're definitely not. They've got 6 points out of the opening 8 games. Oh no, they got 8 points out of the opening 8 games, one less than United, which is terrifying in itself. But they are like a point above the relegation zone after 8 games, above Everton, Southampton, Norwich, and Watford. There isn't a reason why Newcastle can't pick up some results over the next month. Like if you look at their run of fixtures, yes, they've got Chelsea and Wolves next, but Wolves is at home, so they could get points out of that. You then look at the November run of West Ham, Bournemouth, Villa, well, City at the end of November. But those first 3 games, you could realistically say they could. There's no reason why they couldn't get 5 or 6 points out of that. If they keep defensively solid, they can keep some clean sheets, nick a couple of goals here and there. There's no reason why they couldn't get some decent results. And I think having a result like they did against Man United will really bode them well for the rest of the season. It'll give a boost to the players. And having 2 local lads in the form of the Longstaff brothers in midfield, Sean Longstaff playing more of the keeping the ball, keep it ticking over, having the more passing variety, and Matty Longstaff playing the more of the intercepting role and running around chasing after the ball, getting a hold of it and giving it back to Sean to start the build of the play again, really should pay dividends for them. I'm not saying they're going to outclass the midfields, far from it, but they are good enough, and they've got obviously the fact that the brothers will help them in the long run in terms of being able to communicate well with each other in the middle of games when they need to slightly tweak things amongst themselves and obviously change the way up they're playing. They'll be able to do that because it'll almost be telepathic to them. So it does have the makings of a good midfield, I think, for Newcastle. And I think that with the way that Matty plays, he gives Newcastle a bit more energy in the middle of the park, which is something that they've needed. The likes of John Joe Shelby and Isaac Hayden aren't going to give you that. Matty Longstaff will. So yeah, I think that Newcastle can start to look a bit more in the season with a bit more positive light. I think if they finish in around the 12th position, I think Newcastle fans would take that, I think, after the start that they've had, or they did have before the United game. So yeah, we'll see where they end up. Let's hope M&S can pull through and get them up the table. And in terms of my last sort of airing my thoughts out, in terms of the some of the teams, the whole Pep out brigade is just absolute lunacy. I mean, the man has got you 2 Premier League titles in the past season, almost 200 points combined winning both those seasons, one of them where he finished above 100, and one of them, I think the second one finished on around 97 off the top of my head. So you're having a bit of a blip, and the brigade comes out to say Guardiola should be out. He's won 5 games, lost 2, drawn 1, scored 27, conceded 9. Absolutely ludicrous. It's ridiculous to suggest that Guardiola should be sacked. if you gave any other team in that league the position that City are in now, you'd bite their hands off. As a United fan, if I could have City's points total, I'd be biting their hands off. Second after 8 games, with the fixtures that I didn't necessarily being too much of a problem, being more of a problem than it's ended up being. As a United fan, I would absolutely take that. It's absolutely ludicrous for City fans to want Guardiola out. You've seen 2 absolute class seasons of football. Yes, they got a bit unlucky with the Champions League with getting knocked out with Spurs the way they did, but there's no reason why City can't have a strong season in the Premier League, catch up to Liverpool. Let's not forget last season they were 10 points behind Liverpool by Christmas. They can close that gap. Absolutely can. Yes, they've got defensive problems, but they've got the attack where they can go score 5 goals for fun. They're not past 8 past Watford, for Christ's sake. I know Watford are at the bottom of the table, but it's still a Premier League team. Score 8 goals. You're not doing something wrong. You're doing something right. Pep Guardiola getting sacked is absolutely ludicrous, and he won't get sacked. And if anyone suggests otherwise, you off your head. So yeah, City will pick up. I'm absolutely sure of it. So moving on from that mini rant about Guardiola being sacked, we'll go into our weekly predictions. So, first up, we've got Everton versus West Ham for the Saturday early kickoff. Everton in a bit of a precarious position themselves, not doing even worse than Man United, which is hard to believe at this point. They're 18th in the relegation zone, 7 points. West Ham sitting pretty in 8th, 2 points off top 4. If there was a time for an international break for Everton, I think it arrived just at the right time. I'm going to pick this as a 1-1. I don't think it's going to be a terrible result for Everton, but I don't see them scoring the goals that they're going to need against West Ham. West Ham have a lot of threat. If I was going to say one team was going to win the game, I'd probably peg to West Ham, just with how Everton have been. Hopefully this international break helps them sort things out, because Silva is under a lot of pressure at the minute, and if they lose that game, I dare say the axe will be getting set up to swing. So, Villa versus Brighton comes up next. Let's take a look at the two teams. So we've got Aston Villa in 15th and Brighton 14th. Only 1 point between them. This is a home game for Villa as well, and really tough to decide between the two, because Brighton did have a good start, but the results recently have slipped by a little bit. Villa are going to be one of those teams that are inconsistent, but they can score goals. They've got a +1 goal difference. They've scored 13, which is, when I'm looking up and down the table, is one of the better goal scored ratios. They do have a +1 goal difference. They do concede goals though. I'm going to pick this as a Villa 3-1 after the positive result against Norwich, and I think they scored 5 in that one. I can see them continuing that momentum, so I'll say 3-1 Villa. Next you've got Bournemouth and Norwich, and again Bournemouth nice and solid in 10th. 3 wins, 2 draws, 3 losses. You've then got Norwich down in second bottom. I'm going to pick this as a 2-0, 2-1. I'm going to say 2-1 Bournemouth. 2-1 Bournemouth. I just think that Eddie Howe's got Bournemouth running like a well-oiled machine like he does every time at the season. They might have a dip towards Christmas like they usually do, but international break, I think, will help Bournemouth out, resting the players like Wilson, and I think they'll get the win against Norwich. Next you've got Chelsea Newcastle. Even despite the praise I've given to the Longstaff brothers there and to Newcastle, I do think it's going to be 3-0 Chelsea. Chelsea have just picked up momentum since the bad start to the 4-0 loss to United. I think Lampard's got them going in the right direction. They're scoring goals now. They are conceding a little bit too easily for my liking for a team that's trying to get into the Champions League. But as I say that, they're still scoring 4 or 5 goals. I mean, look at Liverpool under Rodgers. They were scoring goals for fun, but still conceding 1 or 2 goals to daft teams that they shouldn't be. So yeah, I think 4-0 to Newcastle. I don't see them conceding to Newcastle 3-0 to Newcastle, sorry, is what I put down. I don't see Newcastle scoring. Just Stamford Bridge has never not necessarily been the greatest of places for Newcastle to go recently. So now that I've said that, watch them come out with a 2-0 win. So yeah, moving on to the next one, we've got Leicester versus Burnley. Again, I said it on the previous podcast how well Brendan Rodgers is doing with Leicester. They're still in the top 4, 14 points, plus 7 goal difference. I think enough has been said about Leicester and how well they're doing. Burnley, they're 7th, they're doing very well as well. I don't think it's going to be an easy game for Leicester. I still expect them to win. I'd say 1-0 Leicester because Burnley are always solid defensively. Leicester might nick it with like an early goal and just keep it solid from the get-go. Tottenham versus Watford, I would say 2-0. I'll say 2-0 to Tottenham. Despite the problems that they've had, I think Spurs are going to start picking up results. I think they were very unlucky with the Lloris injury that they had against Brighton. Obviously, they came out with... They lost to Brighton, didn't they? Pretty sure they lost to Brighton. Let me just quickly check the fixtures. Because Lloris conceded in the early stages. And as he went down, he dislocated his arm. Yeah, they lost 3-0 to Brighton. So despite that, they were unlucky with the Lloris injury. Luck isn't really going their way at the moment, but I still think that they can quite easily beat a Watford team who for all intents and purposes are struggling. If Spurs were to lose to Watford though, I think it does start to raise questions about Pochettino and if the negativity that seems to be coming across in his conferences and has been reported by the media is actually getting into the dressing room. But yeah, I still expect Tottenham to win. A couple of goals for Kane and Bob's your uncle. Wolves versus Southampton. I'm going to pick this as a 2-1 to Wolves. I think Wolves are starting to pick up momentum now. Again, the Thursday nights are going to come back into the equation, which they might start to struggle with again, but they have picked up a couple of wins recently. Let's just see what their results were like, actually, because I'm looking at that. I don't actually think... Yeah, so they did win recently. They beat City 2-0, and then the previous fixture was... Let's have a look. Yeah, so they've got back-to-back 2-0 wins against City and Watford. So they are picking up momentum. They're at home. They've always been strong at home. They don't generally tend to concede too many at home either. And they're playing against a team that is going to struggle scoring goals this season, and they already have conceded 15 goals. So yeah, I'm going to say 2-1 to Wolves in that one. You've then got Palace and City. I expect City to strike back with a vengeance on this one. I'm going to say 5-1 to City. I expect them to be firing on all cylinders and absolutely rip Palace to shreds, even though Palace have had a good start to the season. And they've always been very well organised when it comes to playing the top teams. They haven't scored many goals, but they haven't conceded many either. They're evens on the goal difference, but I still expect City to go out and absolutely blast them away. The next game is Man United versus Liverpool. Taking my Man United fan cap off and taking it from a realistic approach. Can I see United getting any goals? I can. I can see them getting one goal. I can see them getting something early on if they really go for it from the off and hit and almost sucker punch them at the start. If the game settles down a bit more and Liverpool dominate the position, can I see them hit them on the counter and getting a goal? Not with Van Dijk and Co in defence. So I'm going to say 2-1 Liverpool. I don't think we're going to get absolutely battered. Watch me eat my words in the next podcast though. Sheffield United versus Arsenal. Okay, so we've got Arsenal in third. How about Arsenal third? Can someone explain that to me? After watching Arsenal performances, I don't understand how they're third. Not that they should be too far away from that, but yeah, they're third. Never mind. And then they've got Sheffield United, who've made a solid start to the year. 9 points. For classify that is solid. So can I do that for Man United? I don't think so. Tricky. Arsenal don't like playing against these lower teams away. They never found it easy. Sheffield United have been very solid defensively. I'm gonna put this down as a 1-1. Say 1-1. I did say Arsenal 1-1 last time, as a draw last time, and they did fairly well actually, I think. So hopefully that might be a good omen for Arsenal fans going forward if I keep predicting draws for them. So yeah. So on that basis, I'm just gonna have a quick look, just based on the results. So I said Villa would win. So Villa win, Everton draw. So Villa win, they go above us. So we get knocked down. Sheffield get a point above us, so they knock us down. Newcastle lose, Southampton lose. So we won't be in the relegation based on my predictions, that's alright then. We'll still be outside the relegation zone, I'll take that. So that's it for the football really. In terms of what's coming up over the next few weeks, I think we're going to get a podcast organised between me and Millie to look at the NBA, because that's starting up again on the 23rd, with the first couple of fixtures being over on the morning of Wednesday the 23rd. We've got Raptors against Pelicans, and then the big one of Clippers versus Lakers. And then you've got a full round of... Then the NBA gets started good and proper following that. Getting the League Pass up and running will be an absolute must for any basketball fans. Just that first night alone. All four of those teams that are playing on that Wednesday night all have incredibly interesting scenarios going in. You've got the Lakers going in with the new LeBron-Anthony Davis partnership. You've got the Clippers going in with Kawhi. Paul George isn't back yet, but Kawhi should be able to carry them on his own. And the team around them looks great. You've then got the Raptors, who are coming off the championship winning season without Kawhi. Obviously having re-signed Gasol and Lowry and all those guys, and Siakam, and all those guys. And then you've got Pelicans with the young core they've got, and with Zion coming in for his first season. And then it's just going to build from there. The basketball's going to be a very interesting watch. So yeah, I think that's what the next podcast will be, and then we'll have the next Premier League preview / review from the previous week for the next Friday as well. So yeah, lots of content coming your way. If you like it, if you enjoyed the content this week, or if you've listened to anything previous, please feel free to give us a like, share and subscribe. Leave any comments for your predictions below and let us know what you think. I've been Stuart, and I've enjoyed doing this, and I'll speak to you next time.